Christmas is a time that we often associate with waiting or longing. So if you think about the very first Christmas when Jesus came, that was the end of a long period of waiting for the people of Israel as they waited for their Messiah. We just finished a sermon series on the minor prophets where we saw hundreds of years of waiting, people waiting for God to send the promised Messiah. And so Jesus was the end of that waiting. And for us, now that that first coming has happened, we're waiting for Jesus' second coming because we know that that's when he'll set all things right. Now, on a less spiritual level, kind of a more surfacey level, Christmas we all often think of as a time of waiting for gifts, right? This is for kids most of the time. This big question, will I get what I want? Will I not get what I want? And of course, one of the great Christmas movies of all time is based on this one single question of whether or not the main character will get a Red Ryder BB gun. And maybe he will, maybe he won't. We wait the whole movie, and then, of course, at the end of the movie, he gets the BB gun and he shoots his eye out. Most of us who are here this morning, we can look back on childhood and remember a Christmas season when there was like that one gift that we really wanted. And we hoped for it, and we wished for it, and we told people what we wanted. And maybe you got it, and maybe you didn't. I have both stories. I can remember times at Christmas when there was one thing I really wanted, and I got that at Christmas. And then there was that one Christmas where I didn't want anything except for one thing. It's all I wanted. And I made a big deal of telling everybody what I wanted. All I wanted for Christmas was a pair of black Umbro shorts. So Umbro is a soccer brand, and I wanted a very specific shorts. I wanted black shorts with white piping, and that was all I wanted. And I told people, this, I don't want anything else, just this. And I told my parents, I told my friends, I told my friends' parents, anybody I could think of, I said, hey, this is all I want for Christmas. And I thought my odds were pretty good. Because I wasn't asking for a lot, right? I mean, this is basically just a small step up from socks and underwear. So I thought, this is a pretty good chance I'm going to get what I want. And I went into that Christmas morning thinking, this is it. I'm going to get my pair of black Umbros. And I didn't. And I was devastated. I cried myself to sleep. I didn't really. I was in high school. Kind of changes the whole story, doesn't it? And now, some 30 years later, I'm almost over it. The disappointment, right? And it's fun to laugh about a story like that, but the reality is that I'm also guessing that this morning, if we take this out of the context of Christmas, this is a really familiar story for most of us. The story of waiting and hoping and longing and maybe not receiving. There's that something that you've been hoping for a long time and it's just not happening. Something to change in your life that just isn't changing, maybe something to be restored in your life and it's not getting restored, something that you've lost and you don't think you'll ever find it. We all have these things in our lives that it's like, I desperately want this, but I'm not sure it's ever going to happen. And that brings up this question for us of how can I be content when I don't get what I want or what I need? Because, the Bible tells me I have to be content, right? Paul says in Philippians 4, I've learned how to be content in every situation. And, over and over again, we're told you need to be content. You got to be content with what you have. But how can I be content when I'm not getting what I want or what I need? So in the Christmas story, I think we have the answer to that question. And so this morning, we're going to look at the Christmas story as told by Matthew. So we'll be in Matthew chapter 2, and this is a really familiar story. It's the story of the wise men and Herod. All right? So what I want to do this morning is I just want to read the story to you first. We're going to read right through it. It's about 12 verses, and we'll read through it. You can follow along if you want in your Bible, Matthew chapter 2. We'll have the words on the screen, or you can just listen. But as I read this story, I want you to try to pay close attention to the actions. Okay, sometimes when we're studying the Bible, one of the best things that we can do is look for the action words, because the action words really help us to understand what's going on. So pay attention to the actions. Specifically, pay attention to the actions of the wise men and the actions of Herod, and draw some comparisons or some contrasts between them as we go. Here we go, Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. We're not going to go into depth on this today, but probably these guys are from some Eastern country, maybe Persia, maybe Babylon, and they probably had access to old Jewish scrolls that had been brought there by Daniel and the captives hundreds of years earlier. And in those scrolls, they discovered some of the writings, specifically a really crystal clear prophecy in the book of Deuteronomy that talks about a star rising that represented a king. They read that, they put two and two together. So they said, there must be a new king. Let's go find out who he is. And when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all of the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Christ is another way of saying Messiah. So Herod understands immediately these guys are looking for the Messiah. They think the Messiah has been born. And so he says to the people who know the Old Testament, where is it again that the Messiah is supposed to be born? Now, all of you who have been here for the past couple of weeks, you know the answer to this question because we discovered it in the book of Micah, and that's where they point Herod. It said, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly. Do you ever notice how the villains always do their work in the dark, right? Whenever they want to do something they know they shouldn't be doing, they do it secretly, which raises this great question for us. If I'm doing things secretly, should I even be doing them at all? And ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. What a great guy that Herod. After listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Bethlehem is just right up the road from Jerusalem. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. I think there's a lot in here for us, but I want to just kind of pull out two life principles from this story today. All right, Proverbs tells us that we should learn by watching the wise, right? You watch the wise, you see how they live, try to emulate what they're doing. That's a great way to grow wise yourself. And Proverbs says watch the fool, because you can learn from the fool. See the fool's mistakes and then don't imitate the fool. This morning we get to do both. We'll learn from the wise men and we will learn from the fool, that's Herod. Let's start with him. All right, here's life principle number one. Greed is the enemy of contentment. All right, greed is the enemy of contentment. Herod is on the path of greed in this story. If I was going to try to define greed for you, I might do it something like this. Greed is being obsessed with the desire for more or different than what you have. And usually this grows out of believing that you deserve more or different than what you have. This is Herod, right? So when the wise men come and they say, hey, we saw a star and we're looking for the new king of the Jews, then we're told in Matthew 2 that immediately Herod was troubled. Why is Herod troubled by this? Well, because immediately Herod realizes that he's at risk of losing something that's important to him. When they say, where is the new king of the Jews? Herod's like, hold on, guys. I'm the king of the Jews. What do you mean a new king of the Jews? But beyond that, Herod recognizes they're talking about the Messiah. And if there really is the Messiah that has been born, now the people are going to rally to this Messiah. And so now Herod, who loves power, who loves being popular among the people, realizes he might lose both. And Herod doesn't want less power or less popularity. Herod wants more power. Herod wants more popularity. And so he is troubled by this. You see, greed often begins with want, right? We all understand this. When you're driving around and you drive by a house, you're like, whoa, I would like a house like that. Or you see a car out in the driveway, that's a pretty cool car. Or you go to the mall and you're walking around in the mall and you walk past the store and like, oh, I like that outfit. I mean, wherever it is, you see something and you're like, oh, I want that. For me, this happens every Sunday morning when I walk past the cafe, right? I want those donuts. Now, we all understand that we can't get everything we want, right? But want is just the first step on the path to greed, because want eventually leads to need. You see, what happens is often if I see something that I want, I start to think about it. I think about it more and more and more. I can't let go of it. I obsess about it. And eventually that I want becomes I need, right? We've all been here. We've all gone from I want to I need, right? I don't just want a new pair of jeans. I need a new pair of jeans. I don't just want a new pair of shoes. I need a new pair of shoes. Never mind that I already have 20 pairs of shoes in the closet. But I need another one. I want it, but now I'm saying I need it. But we don't ever stop there either. Because the more we think about it, the more we talk about it, the more we play it in our mind, I want becomes I need, and I need becomes I deserve. Right? I deserve that. I've worked hard this week. I deserve a Swiss cake roll. I've done a lot of good for people. I deserve this. We don't just do this with things, right? We do this with people. A lot of times our greed exhibits itself more with people than with things. Think about how you interact with the people around you. Maybe it's the people at work. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's in your family, your kids, or your spouse. There are things you want from them, right? I want this person to do this for me. I want this person to treat me differently than they do. I want this person to behave differently than they are. And I want in the relationship sometimes shifts into I need, right? I need this from you. I need you to do this for me. I need you to be this for me. And before long, I want moves to I need, moves to I deserve. And this is where it can get really troubling because, sometimes parents, we say, I deserve better kids than I have, right? I deserve a better boss than I have. I deserve a better spouse than I have. And maybe you find yourself in this place where I'm in a marriage and there's no contentment because I deserve a better spouse than I have. I'm in a family situation and there's no contentment because I deserve a better family. I'm at work in a job that I have no contentment because do you see how this works? Sometimes greed can lead us to a really dark place. Because what happens is when we begin to say, I deserve, now all of a sudden we see people as there to meet our needs, as there for us. And they become less a person and more an object. And all of a sudden, if they don't give me what I deserve, then I just really don't care for them anymore. And we find ourselves in this place of relational dysfunction. In fact, this is exactly what happens to Herod. If you read down in the story beyond where we stopped, verse 16, it says, Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, because remember the wise men went back a different way. Herod's plan was to have the wise men bring him to Jesus so he could kill Jesus. But he got tricked, and when he saw that he had been tricked, he became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem. You see, greed leads to a tight fist. Okay? When we walk down this path of greed, it starts with I want, it goes to I need, it goes to I deserve. When we walk down this path, our fists get tighter and tighter as we hold on to what we already have. Because I need more, I want more, I deserve more, and I certainly don't want to lose what I have, and so we begin to hold onto a tight fist. But this then leads us into a place of anxiety. Herod was troubled. A place of anger. Herod was furious. And even to a place of violence. Because what does Herod do? He sends and kills all the male children in Bethlehem. Now I hope none of us are going to do that. Right? Herod is one of the all-time worst people to ever live on the face of the earth. But sometimes the violence that we enact in relationships isn't physical violence, but it might be emotional or mental or relational. It may just be a brokenness that we bring into the relationship simply because we think we deserve something that we're not getting. Or we think we need something that we're not getting, or we just want something that we're not getting. And the world tells us that's self-care, And God tells us that's greed. And as long as you are focused on what you don't have, as long as you are focused on what you want or you need or you deserve, you will never be content. And the truth is that all of us walk this path. Different levels, different ways, different times, but all of us so easily can walk down the path of greed. Have you guys ever played the Would You Rather games? Where they just have like crazy would you rather questions. Like I looked for some good ones last night, and I had to find one that I could actually say in church that just wasn't too over the top. And so this is just kind of a funny one. Would you rather wear a Dracula cape everywhere you go for a month, or a pirate eye patch everywhere you go for a month? Tell the person next to you really quick. Just say Dracula cape or eye patch. I don't know. For me, it's the eye patch because I want to look dangerous. Marianne picked the Dracula cape. I don't know why. Here's another one. This one's a little tougher. Would you rather not shower for a week, or 3 times a day have to shower for a week? And like some of you are like, oh, there's no question, I'm showering 3 times a day, that's gross. And some of you are like, I'd love to go a week without showering. Don't tell the person next to you if that's you. Right, I see some of you starting to slide apart, right? I don't want to be too close to that person. Here's one a little more difficult, right? Would you rather give away all of your money or all of your possessions? It's kind of like a no-win question. I get it. But this is one of those questions that helps us start to think about where greed kind of creeps up in our lives. Or maybe this one. Would you rather buy a nicer and newer car, or keep your old one a little longer so you can donate and someone else can simply have a car? Would you rather eat at the nicest restaurant or steakhouse, or maybe just cook a meal and make a donation so someone else can simply have a meal? Would you rather live in your dream house, or maybe downsize so you can donate time and money so someone else has a place they can lay their head? Would you rather have the latest and greatest smartphone, or maybe just hold on to that older model for a little bit longer and make a donation that might help end global slavery? Now, I know, this is church, so the answers are obvious. I know you guys know the answers to all these questions, right? And I get that. But I think these questions highlight a little bit for us where maybe those areas of greed can grow up in our lives. Where these things that we chase after, that we think we need, or I deserve a new car. I deserve a bigger house. I deserve to go out to eat tonight. I deserve the new iPhone 81 or whatever they're on, right? I deserve it. I need it. I want it. And that greed will grow up in you. And just like Herod, it leads to anxiety, and it leads to anger, and it leads to relational brokenness. And so the question for us this morning is, how do I take a different path? I don't want to take the path of greed, right? I don't want to run down this path of want, need, deserve, anxiety, anger, violence. That's not the path for me. What's the better path? The better path is the path of contentment, right? So we actually, in this story, have a formula for contentment. I love this. So the formula for contentment is very simple. It's just gratitude plus generosity equals contentment. We see this in the wise men. The wise men, this is verse 10. It says, when they saw the star, what did they do? They rejoiced exceedingly. This is great. They see a star. How many times have you seen a star? We've all seen a lot of stars. They see this star, it's a special star, and they throw a party. They rejoice exceedingly. So this isn't like, yeah, and they were okay with it, right? It's not, and they were happy. It's not, and they said, yay. They rejoiced. It's like if the Bengals won in overtime, right? They rejoiced exceedingly. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. So do you see the path they're walking? It's the exact opposite of Herod's path. They're walking on this path that begins with gratitude. Gratitude is very different than want. Right? When I'm focused on what I want, I'm not grateful. When I focus on what I have, I'm grateful. So their path starts with gratitude, which is the antidote to always wanting more. And then that gratitude leads to generosity. That's the next step on their path. They give the gifts. And this is the exact opposite of need, right? You can choose to go from I want to I need, or you can choose to go from I have and I'm rejoicing about it to I'm giving. Because if I'm only focused on what I need, I'm not focused on what anybody else needs. But if I focus on what others need and how I can meet those needs, I'm no longer focused on what I need. You see how contentment is the exact opposite of greed. Greed is the enemy of contentment. And if you choose the want, need, deserve, anxiety, anger, violence path, you'll never be content. The wise men say, choose better. Choose to take the path that begins with gratitude, even in the small things, right? Sometimes I talk about gratitude, and I know people are like, David, it's easy for you to talk about gratitude. So many good things are happening in your life. I'm like, yes, they are. And one of the reasons is because I talk about them all the time, right? You don't hear me talk about the bad stuff, right? Because I don't want to do that. I want to talk about the good stuff because I want to be an example to you of a person who's grateful. But there's good stuff in your life too. And sometimes you say, David, there's a lot of bad stuff in my life. Yeah, I get it. But there's good stuff too. Look, you're here. How'd you get here this morning? Well, I'm going to guess first thing you did is you took a breath when you woke up. Okay? That's something to be grateful for. Many of you had breakfast. Some of you had bacon. Probably had some coffee. Already you're ahead of 95% of the world. And then you got in a vehicle and you drove here, right? Something that very few people in the world can do, something that had only been done for the last 100 years of history. And here we are living in the greatest time of history in a place where we are full of abundance, and we say, I'm not sure I have anything to be grateful for. Just look around. Think about all you do. The sun came up today. That's something to be grateful for, right? Who wants to live in a world without sun? We're in the middle of December, and it's like 80 degrees out. I know that's not something to be grateful to me, but some of you guys like that, I know. Be grateful in the little things. Find gratitude in the small things, and then let that gratitude lead you to a place of generosity. Have you ever thought in this story about what the wise men got out of it? They didn't. Nothing. Like there's nowhere in the story where like, and here's what the wise men got out of it. Here's how they benefited. All we know is they came, they gave, and they left. And we know nothing else about them. Because all they were focused on was being generous. And they worked really hard to be generous. I mean, they had to take this long trip. Their trip altogether probably took them 2 years. They were riding on camels across the desert. You know, they had to look all over for Jesus. They had this king who wanted to do evil things. They had to work hard to be generous, and they were happy to do that because generosity gets us off of our own troubles. It stops us thinking about ourselves, starts us thinking about others. And some of you here in this month of generosity who are taking the giving challenge, I keep hearing story after story from people who are like, I just thought this was going to be a small thing, and you can't believe how much it blessed me. I talked to someone between services who simply gave $5 to someone, and they said, if I had known how they would respond, I would have given them $100. Because it was such a blessing to me the way they responded, because generosity puts our hearts in the right place. So what I want to do this morning, though, is I want to kind of wrap things up by showing you two really cool words, all right? So there's two words that pop up in this story repeatedly, and they seem to be insignificant. And you know, I don't know, I've read this story hundreds of times. I've preached on this story a whole bunch of times, and I've never noticed until this week. Like I had my sermon all written, and all of a sudden I'm reading through the story, I'm like, hey, that's kind of interesting. And I circle these words, I'm like, that's kind of cool. I gotta find a way to work that in. So the first of these words is the word when. When. The word when pops up several times here. It says, when Herod heard the wise men's questions, right? So the wise men show up in Jerusalem when Herod heard their question. The next one is when the wise men saw the star. Later on, when Herod saw he had been tricked. And what I immediately noticed in each of these places that the word when shows up is that these are circumstances outside of the person's control. Because the word when reminds us that you cannot control everything. Right? Herod did not choose to have the wise men show up in Jerusalem. I don't know what he was doing that day. He was going through his normal king day, whatever he was doing. And all of a sudden, here come these wise men and their camels. He didn't choose to make that happen. He had no control over it. It just happened. When the wise men left Jerusalem, they couldn't just dial up the star. They couldn't pull out their phone, hey God, could you put the star back up? We're ready to go, right? They had no control. They had no idea. The star came back, not because they did anything, not because they had earned it or not because they deserved it, but simply because God is gracious and awesome and he put the star back out for them, but it had nothing to do with them. It was completely out of their control. Now, Herod tried to control the wise men, right? He lied to them. He said, hey, guys, you go find this baby, and when you find him, come back and tell me so I can worship him too. He's trying to control them, but what we all know, if we're honest with ourselves, is we cannot control other people. By the way, if you're still trying to control other people, you are going to be very sad. You're going to be very angry, and you're never going to be content because you cannot control other people. Herod could not control the wise men, and so when he learned that the wise men had tricked him, Herod discovers that he cannot control everything. But greed is often rooted very deeply in the soil of control. Because a lot of the times when we want something, we begin to try to control everything around us and everyone around us so that we can have it. And if we move from want to need, our efforts to control even grow more. And when we move from need to deserve, now we really try. One of the reasons kids get so angry with their parents is because their parents have tried to control them because their parents think they deserve something better from their kids. Greed. If you're married and you haven't figured this out yet, you need to figure it out today. You cannot control your spouse. And whatever it is you think you deserve from your spouse that you're trying to control them to get out of them, you're ruining your marriage, you're not making it better. Greed is rooted in this need to control everything. In fact, I'll get back to that. That'll go better later. The second word is then. Okay? So when reminds us that we can't control anything, but this word then also pops up several times in the story. It says, then Herod summoned the wise men. So when the wise men showed up, they asked this question. Herod talks to all of his guys, and then he comes back, and then he summons the wise men. Later on, it says, then the wise men opened their gifts. So after seeing the star and finding the child, then they opened their gifts. That's when they were generous. Later on, when Herod discovered the wise men had tricked him, then he became furious and he demanded that all the babies in Bethlehem be slaughtered. You see, then is the responsive word. It's the action word. The then follows the when. But also then is a directional word. And this is what I want you to see, okay? So we use then as a directional word all the time. It indicates progress or motion, right? So I did that, and then I did that. I went there, and then I went there. I ate that, and then I ate this. You see how that works? So then is the way we indicate movement or progress or direction. And that's exactly what's happening in this story too. Herod cannot control the when the wise men show up. The wise men can't control the when the star shows up. But they all can control the then. And by controlling the then, they're controlling their direction. So when you realize that you can't control everything, then you can always control your direction. This is important. Because remember where the direction took the two people. Herod's direction, want, need, deserve, anxiety, anger, violence. Because all along, he's choosing the wrong then. When something happened outside of his control, then he responded with greed. Then he responded with, I deserve. Then he responded with anxiety. But the wise men, when stuff happened outside of their control, then they responded with gratitude. Then they responded with generosity. And their then is leading them down the road to contentment. Do you understand? Contentment is not something that just happens. Paul says in Philippians 4, this is where we started. Paul says in Philippians 4, I have learned to be content in whatever situation I find myself. And I love that he begins by saying, I have learned, because what he's saying to us is, I've not always been here. This isn't where I started. This is a process. It's something that we have to learn. It's something that we develop over time. See, I have in my heart seeds of greed and seeds of contentment, and whichever ones I water, that's what's going to grow. And so if I water the greed by thinking about what I want, what I need, what I deserve, then that greed is going to grow, and it will lead to anxiety and anger and violence. But if I water the seeds of contentment by saying, I'm going to be a grateful person, I'm going to be a generous person, then that contentment grows and I can find myself where Paul found himself. I have learned how to be content in every situation. Now here's the hard reality. And I know that some of you are here this morning. Some of you are here thinking it's the when that will bring you contentment. But you can't control the when. And so in your mind and in your heart, you're saying things like, when this happens, then I'll be content. When that person does this for me, then I'll be content. When I get this, then I'll be content. When this situation changes, then I'll be content. It doesn't work that way. You can't control the when. You can only control the then. When I don't get the black Umbros, then I can cry myself to sleep. Then I can still complain about it 30 years later. And if any of my siblings were here, they'd be just rolling their eyes because they say, then you've been complaining about it for 30 years, every year. That's true. When I don't get the black Umbros, then I can choose gratitude. I can pursue generosity. When you don't live in the house you want, for a lot of reasons, but when you don't live in the house you want, then you can choose to complain. You can choose to be depressed. You can choose to get angry. Or then you can choose gratitude. And you can pursue generosity. When your Christmas experience isn't all you hoped it would be, then you can still choose gratitude. You can still pursue generosity. When your marriage isn't what you had hoped, then you can still choose gratitude and you can still pursue generosity. And by the way, do you know how much it will change your marriage if you choose generosity over need and over deserve and over expectations? So when your marriage isn't what you want, then you can choose gratitude and you can pursue generosity. When you don't get treated like you want, this is all of us, right? When you don't get treated like you want, then you can choose revenge. Then you can choose to gossip. Then you can choose to clam up. Or then you can choose gratitude, and then you can choose generosity. I wish I could tell you life's going to be awesome for the rest of your life, but it's not. There are going to be times in life when you're disappointed, when you don't get what you want, and it might be a whole lot bigger than a pair of black Umbros. You might not get that Red Ryder BB gun. There might be a lot of bigger things that you don't get in life, and you can't control that. And when you can come to grips with the reality that you can't control it, now you can start to say, what can I control? Then I can control my gratitude and I can control my generosity. But here's the secret that lies beneath all of this. You see, I've been preaching this whole sermon with an assumption. And the assumption is that there is someone out there who does control all of this. And that someone cares deeply for us. Because God is in control. And there is never anything that happens that's outside of his control. There's never anything that happens that surprises him. There is never anything that happens that puts him into a panic. There is never anything that happens that he says, oh no, I didn't see that coming. What will we do now? God is always in control. And right alongside that truth is this amazing truth that God loves us deeply and he will always do what is best for us. And the thing he did to prove that was sending Jesus. There's a lot of things I want in life. There's a lot of things I think I need in life. There's even some things I think I deserve in life. None of them are as true as this. The one thing I need has already been given to me by Jesus. And man, that is the truth. That is the foundation of contentment. Because when I realize that Jesus has already given me everything I need, and even if there are disappointments in this life, even if I miss out on things in this life, even if there are things that are out of control in this life, I know what he has for me in the next life, and I know that my God, my Father, is in control, and he is always working for me. He is always doing what I need, and so I can rest and I can say, you know what? I can't control all this, and that's okay. And I might not get what I want, and that's okay. And I might not get what I think I need, and that's okay because he's promised to supply all my needs. And I might not get what I think I deserve because the truth is the only thing I deserve is eternity separated from him, and he's already solved that problem for me. So where does contentment come from? It comes from knowing the truth of who God is, what he has done, and how Jesus has saved me. And when I know that, now I can be grateful. And now I can be generous. And I can trust my Father to take care of the rest. When disappointment comes, when the unexpected happens, when you lose something you didn't think you could lose, when that happens, then you can choose gratitude and you can choose generosity.